Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's genealogy program. I'm Jessica Wortman from the Royal Gorge Regional Museum and History Center, and today's topic is Christmas is coming. And Christmas is coming. We see the stores getting ready. We see the advertisements, and we all get so busy shopping and preparing for the holidays. But another really important part of that is the time that we get to spend together. And sharing. And so the holidays are a really great opportunity to share your family's history and to make some new memories. And Terry's got some great ideas on how we can do that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Terri.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another genealogy session. So if you're having any trouble, hopefully not, you can send an email to get you started. Most of us concentrate on doing our genealogy work, and we turn to Ancestry or we turn to courthouses, and we gather up a whole bunch of paper information or digital information. And it winds up either in file cabinets spread out on our dining room tables or sometimes in boxes. And we tend to overlook the aspect of sharing the research and sharing the information that we have found. So let's take a look with the Christmas season in mind and see if there aren't some ways for you to share some of the research that you have collected. So the first thing is, don't let it sit in those boxes and or on your computer. We do want to share with other members of our family or distant family members that perhaps we haven't seen. And there are cases where there are family members that we might be corresponding with that we've never even met. So the idea of sharing the results of your research. And as we've seen, genealogy takes many forms. We start out with family group sheets and pedigree and or ancestral or descendant charts. And those are some of the easiest things for us to share, whether they are handwritten or computer generated. They are a valuable source of information and an easy way to share with your family. You can put these in a folder or put them on CD or a DVD. So how do you want to prepare to share? And one of the simplest things to add meat to the bones is to add photographs, perhaps with these sheets and or charts. If you happen to be fortunate enough to have a tape recording or a videotape from either a family reunion or an interview with a relative, is there a way for you maybe to duplicate those and share those with family members? Scrapbooks, photo albums, remembrance books, those are also a wonderful way to share your research. And one of the popular ways is family cookbooks, and including photos and stories or anecdotes about some of the recipes that you might include. And we're going to look at some of these ideas. So the first step you want to do is, who do you want to share the information with? Do you want to keep it within the immediate family, brothers and sisters? If you're fortunate enough to still have your parents or grandparents, do you want to share something with them? Do you want to share a story from your own life or from their lives? And what do you want to share? Do you want to share just the facts? For example, those family group sheets or those ancestral charts? Or do you want to embellish upon it and perhaps write a story? The other thing is, how much do you want to share? Do you want to stick with a single generation? Do you want to do one side of your family or both sides of your family? And of course, once you get into multiple generations, you might wind up sharing a lot of information. And the critical thing is, here we are all the way practically in the middle of October. Do you have time to do and undertake the project that you have in mind? We're going to take a look at those family group sheets and the various charts. This is one of the least complicated and less expensive ways of sharing the information. Descendant charts, family group sheets can be generated by software. If you have a software program on your computer, an app that would automatically print these, most of these programs do automatically create them so that you could print them out, put them in a binder, and share those with family. If you don't have that, you can create these by hand. And that might be a more personal way even of attaching the information. If you have an account with Ancestry or with Family Search, you can also download these various forms of charts and sheets of information and arrange them in some kind of order, whether it starts with you and works backwards, or if you're choosing an older ancestor and want to move forward. But establish an idea of order for the things. And one way to embellish these is to add photographs. Do you have photographs of your grandparents? Do you have photographs from your own life that you might want to include in sharing with others? And then how do you want to include this information? If you want to just photocopy it and insert it into a folder or put it into a 3-ring binder, those are easy ways to share. And in addition to giving these to family members and sharing it with them, you might also consider sharing this with local libraries or local history centers or local museums that might be interested in the genealogical research that you have done where your ancestor lived. And if that is one of the cases, if you do share it with a library or a museum, make sure that you put your contact information on the forms so that if anyone happens to strike gold, they can contact you and share their part of the family. Here's an example of a pre-printed family group sheet that comes off of the software that I happen to have on my computer. This happens to be my grandfather and my grandmother and their 4 children. You could do a handwritten chart for this information, and it does include their births, their deaths, their marriages, the vital statistics. And here we're going to look at a descendant chart. These are the same people, but we see them in a descendant chart form. And we see my grandfather first, my mother's oldest brother, and his children and his grandchildren. Here again, the software will automatically create it, or you can hand develop one of these charts. Frequently with a descendant chart, we do see it in this more usual format. You have multiple generations in different colors to separate them so that you can see. And this helps you to also identify those cousins, versus the cousins once removed, etc. And I said to perhaps add photographs that might add another dimension. This one is a reproduction of a reproduction of a reproduction. So it's very, very faded, but this happens to be my grandfather and my grandmother on their wedding day in 1903. And their children, my Uncle Thomas, my mother, and her two younger brothers. So add some photographs. Do you have a picture of the house that the family might have lived in? And does that provide more interest? Is it something that still exists today? Or is it an old photo that you might have found and the house no longer exists? We also have ancestor charts. So going the other direction, we see my grandfather, his parents, and the further generations back. Here again, multicolored so that you can separate out the generations and know how far back you're going. And perhaps if you're fortunate enough, this is the one and only picture that I have of one of my great grandparents. So add that and share that with other family members. Family Search does allow you to create fan charts. So this is another way to look at an ancestral chart and is very stylish. So you might include this type of chart. As we've mentioned, you want to include these either in a folder or put them in a notebook. And one of the key critical items is that everything does not have to be done all at one time. Just take, for example, that simple one generation of your grandparents, their children, and the grandchildren, nieces and nephews for that other generation. It doesn't have to go back 15 generations. It gives you time to do more research and perhaps think about next year adding further information to what you have already supplied. So don't think about this as a one-time gift, but perhaps an ongoing gift. Do you want to include more? So far, we've pretty much just looked at the facts, one generation after another with those simple births, marriages, and deaths. But is there other information that you have collected? Other documents, other photos, newspaper clippings, any kind of research that you might have done about their hometown, or various other aspects of their life that you might want to include in this binder. So for example, if we move out to a different generation and include some of the siblings that are off to the side, this happens to be a picture of my grandmother and grandfather. This is my mother, but this is my grandmother's brother and his family. And so include information that you might have about those lateral lines because they did share some of the same ancestry that you do. This happens to be a marriage register from a Catholic church in Colorado Springs, where my Uncle John and his wife were married in 1943. So is this a piece of information? Do you have church registers where some of your family might have been baptized or christened, where their marriage might be recorded? And that you might want to share with your family. Newspaper announcements of marriages or births or other events might also be of interest to your collateral lines. Some of my relatives, this says that it's a convent. It was actually an orphanage. And when my grandfather's brother died in 1919, his 3 children were put in an orphanage temporarily while their mother, who at the time was a widow, had no source of employment, made arrangements for actually, she moved in with her brother, who had lost his wife and unborn child in the 19 flu epidemic. And it was later that the children, the 3 girls, were brought out of the orphanage and put into the home with a mother and their uncle. So are there postcards, pictures that you can find online? And is there a story that you want to tell, like I just told you, that maybe other family members don't know about? A picture of an outside or an interior of a church. If your family lived in the same community for multiple generations, perhaps a church was a significant part of their lives. That's where a lot of social opportunities existed and where a lot of social events occurred. So the church, whether it be the front or the inside, might be a valuable photo to share with other members of your family. We've talked about pretty much paper things, but if you happen to be someone who collects things digitally, you might want to create a CD or a DVD for either one generation, or in this particular case, it's a couple of generations. You're going to want to make sure that you have some kind of numbering system that makes sense to you. You're probably going to want to create a text file that explains the organization that you are choosing to use, so that the person can read that first, so that they too understand how you have organized the material and what you are including. In this particular case, this was for my neighbor, and this was his information and his sister's information. We then went to his parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on. So I created an organization that hopefully made sense to him, and then he shared the copy of the DVD with other members of his family, especially his children. Photographs are another wonderful way to share genealogy research, and they're an easy way getting either duplications made or making your duplications by scanning them on your own computer. It does allow you to come up with some unique ideas. And do you want to print them out to share, or do you want to share them digitally? Do you have an individual portrait of someone from your ancestry, a grandmother, a great-grandmother who is no longer around? And is it something that might be extremely meaningful to the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren? They may never have seen a picture of this particular ancestor. This happens to be an old photo. It is not part of my family, but having copies made and presenting them either framed or in some kind of a simple album or a simple display might be a unique idea and way to celebrate this one individual. Is there an old picture of perhaps a relative with a sibling that you may have the only copy of that photo and others in the family may be looking for it? So think of other ways that you might be able to share these photographs. Was there a particular anniversary that might have been celebrated where all of the children returned to their home place so that a photo of the entire family might have been taken? And is this something that would be shared with generations, either older generations or younger generations? Would you like to create a collage? You can choose one individual from the family, include some younger pictures, some mid-range pictures, and some older pictures. Do you have some documents that might be included in the collage? Are there family members that might be included in the collage? Are there unique things? Is there something unique for this particular ancestor that you might want to include? Did he belong to a fraternal organization, for example, or had he done service? Did he win medals in one of the wars? That you might want to include photographs of those medals and include those on a collage to send to family members and share with family members. There's also the idea of a family collage. Do you want to look at a single generation? Take, for example, your parents' generation and their children. Do you want to include all of those in a family collage? Put a simple census as the background for the collage and add the various photos that you might have. If you don't have as many photos as this particular example, you might also include other forms of documentation that show their life history. And then there are always photo albums. Do you have a family photo album? I personally do not, but, and think not only the prior generations, but think about the current generation. Would your grandchildren or children like to have a collection of photographs of some of their ancestors or of them? Give one of your children a pictorial album of their life and include cousins, their children, if you happen to have grandchildren. But think of other ways that you could include photos in the family story. As opposed to just a photo album, you might think about a scrapbook along the similar line, but you're going to see more, rather than photos, you're going to see more documents, programs from certain happenings. You could add newspaper clippings. Are there ship lists or immigration papers or any number of genealogy records that you might include in a scrapbook to be given to various members of the family? Present these to your siblings or that whole generation of cousins. And with the advent of the 21st century, digital photo books are very, very popular. Have you gone somewhere with a relative, and have you had photos taken that you might want to share with other members of the family? Simple digital photo books. You can order these online. You create them yourself, and they're nominally cost. So you could share these with other family members. One of the simplest ideas, here again, an online application that you could create yourself, is just have an annual calendar with a couple of pictures on it that you might want to share with one of the family members. Or you can do a monthly calendar that would include 12 pictures from the family. And also, you could create a calendar that has all of the birthdays of some of your ancestors or the significant occasions. I know that Family Search notifies you on a pretty regular basis when one of your family members is having some event. An ancestor might be celebrating a birthday, a marriage, or a death and burial date. Create a birthday calendar that might just have the birthdays, or you can have an event calendar for the ancestors that would record all of those significant events. And you'll notice that those, we find out who the children are, the year that their picture was taken, but we see the birthdays within that particular month. A friend of ours with the COVID virus this past year, and with us being in isolation, we took up doing puzzles. And a friend of ours actually had a puzzle made for us with a picture of the two of us. So that too, especially for children, you might want to have a puzzle created that shows a picture of yourself or some other family occasion or memory that, in terms of a puzzle, would give them an activity to perform. We've talked a little bit about tape recordings and videos. There are audio and video transfer services, if you don't know how to do this yourself, that can help you preserve the memories of these particular items. My husband, back in, I believe, the 1960s, did a tape recording of his grandmother. Unfortunately, it was one of those reel-to-reel tapes that went for about 45 minutes or an hour, and 30 minutes into it, he forgot to turn over the tape because he was so interested in the stories. But to this day, we do have that, and we have converted that from a reel-to-reel tape to a digital copy. Were there home movies in your family that might have been taken in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or more currently, that you would like to have duplicated. Here again, my husband's family was very, very active in doing videos, and he made numerous copies for cousins and shared those with them. Does your family like to cook? And would a family cookbook be something that would be of interest to them? The first thing to make sure is that you include the actual recipe. But do you want to include photos of the family members that are actually doing some of the cooking together? Do you want to take a photo of the finished dish? Is the recipe from an ancestor, and what's the story? How did you get that recipe? Is it something that has gone on for multiple generations? In the Meeks family, there is a recipe for Meeks candied apples, and it has come down through multiple generations, and it is incumbent upon each of us to share that with the descendants of those people. So my daughters, as well as our grandchildren, are now learning how to make the Meeks family candied apples. And there might be other recipes as well that have special meaning for your family. Was there a particular occasion each year where a certain menu was set, and it was always, it's similar to Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner, but is there a birthday dinner that always occurred and it was the same meal that you might want to share with those future generations? Here is an example of a family cookbook that was put together collecting Glass family recipes from brothers, sisters, grandparents, and it was given to a Glass family member upon his marriage, so that his new wife, who was from outside of the family, could be included. It has a simple comb binding on the side, so it does not have to be expensive. If you're particularly artistic, I am not, this might be a way to include a recipe, but also to include an illustration. So if you want to have fun and explore some of your talent, you might include a drawing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a cookbook. You can, if you are of an artistic inclination, you can share drawings that you have done. Have you drawn a portrait of someone in your family that you might want to share? Someone, the younger generation, learning how to cook in the family. Do you want to include a picture of that person actually doing some of the cooking? Here again, a simple solution on a cookbook. We have a recipe. We have the simple side binding, and just using a rubber stamp with some colored ink to illustrate the recipe. And then, of course, there are those family cookbooks that are professionally published. They may be self-published, but here you get into a more expensive venue, but perhaps that is something that if you have cousins or sisters or even brothers, men cook as well. Do you want to get together with them, collect all of the recipes, the photographs, the stories that may go into a family cookbook? Write a story. We all shy away from this. This is going to be one of those hard things to do. We just always think that sitting down and writing something is going to be an onerous task. But how do you write that story? Well, just like the eating of the elephant, you just nip off one bite at a time and you force yourself to write one simple paragraph. It doesn't have to be a 300-page story. It doesn't have to be a lengthy tome. But do you want to remember an individual, a single event? What happened in a particular time period? Is there a significant birthday that you happen to remember? Do you remember a parent's 50th wedding anniversary celebration? Is there a story to tell around that event? Did you go to summer camp when you were a child? Camp is different nowadays. School is different nowadays than it was even 20 or 40 years ago. Is there a unique story that you have to tell that might be worth writing? And just start by doing a little at a time. I wrote this story actually several years ago now. It is not a lengthy story because I know very, very little about these people. These are my first generation ancestors that go back to approximately the early 1600s. I do not have documents that support their actual birth and marriage, but by doing some of the research and looking at some of the early census records or ship records, I was able to find out a little bit of information. So, and when you don't know the information about it, look to some of those history books. Your people may not be named in them, but if they settled in a particular area that does have a history, or perhaps there is a history written about someone else in the local area that might have been more famous, glean that information and share it. This happens to be the first page, and the area where this great-grandfather happened to come from, the La Chaussee area. We actually visited the area in Nova Scotia where my people settled, and this is an actual picture of the dikes that they were recruited to build in the 1600s. So embellishing the story a little bit with a photo always helps. And in Canada, they actually took censuses very early on. This happens to be from 1671, and this is for those ancestors. And it really is perhaps the only document that I have that they are both recorded specifically together. And it is written in French, and it does tell how many animals they had and their approximate ages. Here again, there are no cemetery records. There were not tombstones. There were wooden crosses, usually in the burial area. So there's very little information that I have about them, but enough to have a very small story. And you might have a lot more information about an older generation that you might want to share with your family. This is another story, just 3 simple paragraphs about an ancestor that you either know or don't know much information about. But by looking at some of the history documents, the local history, you may be able to create a story. And I will emphasize again, take a story from your own life. If you have children or grandchildren, do they know all of the significant events that occurred in your life? Yes, they may know your birthday. Yes, they may know when you married grandpa, but do they know what schools you went to? Were you involved in sports? Did you play softball, hockey? Did you do jump rope and play jacks when you were child? When you were in first grade, what school did you attend? And during recess, did you play on the seesaw? Did you play red light? What are some of the games that there are thousands and thousands of stories that you can tell about your own life that are probably significantly different than the lives that our children and grandchildren are leading today. So think about those aspects as well. Do you have a family heirloom that you might want to give as a gift to a relative or a descendant? Or do you want to share a story about that particular item? You can, here again, share the story, tell how you came into possession of the item. Do you still have the item? Is it something that's in your household, or is it something that is transitional? Do you have, for example, just a birthday card that might have been sent, or a Valentine that might have been sent during the Civil War period that has come down through your family? And if you have something of a more sizable thing, like a piece of furniture. One of my friends had a pie safe that had come down through multiple generations. Do you use that pie safe? Do you still put pies in that pie safe? Or is it used simply for display purposes now? So here again, opportunities for sharing stories, as well as, is it an heirloom that perhaps you might want to share with the younger generation? These are charm bracelets. The one on the bottom is my charm bracelet. The one above is my mother's charm bracelet. And most of the charms actually have meaning. This is my high school ring. This is my grandmother's graduation pin from 1896 from Egbert's High School in Cohoes, New York. This is a locket that belonged to my grandfather. This is my mother's charm bracelet. And the locket contains pictures of my grandparents. $2.50 gold pieces. Simple things. This happens to be my paternal grandmother's wedding band, and there's a tiny diamond from my maternal grandfather's tie clasp. These are studs these are instead of buttons, they were from my mother when she was a very, very young child. And they're just studs to hold things together. And there are 3 of them that have been soldered together. So there are stories behind each one of these charms. Each one of them has a meaning. And the story, as well as the actual bracelets, will be passed down in the family. Something as simple as a pin and the story behind the pin, along with a picture of the relative. This happens to be from a friend of mine who shared this information, but there's a simple story, a picture, a little design that she has added, and the actual pin to be passed down. Now we're getting into those long-term projects. These might be things that you might entertain the idea about doing, but probably are definitely not going to happen between now and Christmas of 2021. There are many companies that make pre-printed charts that are decorative charts that you can then hand letter with the information that you know about your family members. Here again, if you do calligraphy work, you can make them fancy. If you have simple, good penmanship, you can fill them in yourself, or you can hire someone to decorate the chart for you. But these do exist, and it's a unique way to share with someone. And you can have them duplicated once one of them is completed. If you're into cross stitch, you can either design or purchase a pre-printed form that allows you to fill in the information from your particular family members. Here again, something that's cross stitch is going to take many, many hours to complete, and would be probably just a single gift that you would give to someone really special in the family. This represents a labor of love and a labor of much research that has been done. This is a unique way of presenting a family, an ancestry chart, and the voyages that each one of the members of the family have made through the centuries when they immigrated originally to the United States, whether they came on a sailing ship or a steamship, and the migration routes that they covered here within the United States. So here again, this is something that's going to take multiple years. You might want to do this just for yourself, or you might think about doing it first for yourself and then think about the relative that you want to share this with many years in the future. Each one of the relatives is documented. They have a unique color for their migratory routes. And there is the history behind each one of these people that will be shared at some particular moment in time. You can have photographs put on material. It can be a do-it-yourself process, or it can be a professionally done process. This particular quilt happens to have extremely special meaning for this woman. She is a resident of Fort Worth, and she is a descendant of the people that are in these photographs. She is a Holocaust, or her grandparents were Holocaust survivors. The photos were hidden. They were buried in the family's yard when they were taken away to prison camps. They did not all survive, but a couple of them did. They came back to their home and were able to locate the photographs. And the photographs have been passed down, but she had this quilt made for both sides of her family. And then you can always undertake the idea of organizing a family reunion. This might be something that will take 1 or 2 years of planning. Hopefully, perhaps, maybe only something at Christmas time, you could plan the reunion for this next summer. It does involve a lot. Where are you going to hold it? Who is going to be invited? Getting the invitations out, finding out where everyone lives. Sometimes it is hardest to find the current information rather than the previous information. So perhaps you might want to entertain the idea of organizing a family reunion. And if you have other unique ideas that you have discovered in your own family history that you might want to share with other family members, now is the time to start thinking about those. There are easy projects to do. There are difficult projects to do. But don't let your genealogy research sit in file drawers. Don't let it sit on your computer. Get out there and share the information in a more personal way than just uploading a family tree to Family Search or to Ancestry.com. Make something that really is going to be meaningful to the members of your family. And we'll put in a little advertisement next month. This is a new topic for me that I am currently working and studying on. We're going to look at adoption records and what can and cannot be found. The vast majority of it is not on the internet. So we'll be looking at new and unique sources for information. So with that, I will turn it over to any questions that you might have.
Okay, Terri, we don't have any questions, but one of the things I wanted to point out is we have some new people that have not seen your previous presentations, and I want them to realize that all of these videos that we're making of these Zoom presentations are available through the History Museum's website, and from there they'll give you a link that goes to YouTube where people can either review subjects that they saw or subjects that they missed out on. They'd have a chance to view those and maybe share those links with other people as well, dealing with genealogy and how we apply it. one of the things that you were talking about is sharing via CDs and DVDs. Need to add in thumb drives as well. It's a fairly easy way of sharing all these computer memories. The challenge that we have is the horror story of genealogists is when we pass, our descendants receive our whole archive and library. They empty out the contents of the page protectors and only save the notebooks and the page protectors for school projects, and everything else is lost. That's the horror story. But as far as what can last the longest, we realize that all these photos need to be passed on like you received them yourself. They need to be passed on because a photograph, a black and white, can last 100 or more years. Color, maybe not so long as far as the color tinting. Anything that is written, we've actually have records that were over 100 years old that was in pencil or pen. So really passing on this information we have can be done in many ways, but we want to think about what is easiest to transmit large amount of data, which is the computer files, or how do we make sure that the collections that we have obtained over the years are passed on and preserved for future generations. So as you have got involved in a recent project of a family photo album that was going to be sold at a garage sale for $5 or thrown away at the end of the day because apparently it has no value, we as genealogists have a treasure trove of priceless information and artifacts, and to be able to continue this on to other generations is so important. So as a Christmas gift or an activity like the calendars, reminders throughout the year are just wonderful ideas how to share this with our current and future generations.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so as you can see here on the screen, our website is museum.canyonscity.org. We have a lot of good resources there. And of course, you can come down to the museum. So we're open to the public Wednesdays to Saturdays, 10 to 4. And we are also at the local history center. So we're happy to help with anything we can. That's what we're here for. And what you were just saying, Dan, was kind of what I was thinking about too, is just the importance of not just sharing the information, but how do we share it in a way that the next generations are going to value it and keep it and protect it. You look at people don't even have printers in their home offices anymore, and they just don't, it's just not how people are operating with a bunch of paperwork and all of that. And so I think, Terri, you touched on we touched on a lot of really great stuff. But one of the things I was thinking about is you mentioned kind of the digital photo albums, digitizing the tape recordings and the video recordings. And I think that is so valuable. And it can be really overwhelming thinking of that technology, but that there are resources out there, as you mentioned, that can help with that, getting those files transferred, or even just helping you to understand how to get that into those digital formats. Really good stuff. I did have a question. The picture of you two in the puzzle, where was that?
Oh, that picture was taken in France. That is Mont Saint-Michel, which was an abbey, and it is out in the middle of the sea. And when the tide comes in, the only way to access it is by a boat. Actually, there is a causeway that's at a little bit higher elevation, and the place has thousands of steps. It's a rock, and you climb up the rock, and thousands of steps up to the abbey. So one correction I want to make to what Dan said, the link to the videos for the previous sessions is via YouTube, not through the museum's website, but via YouTube, and simply entering Royal Gorge Regional Museum and History Center, and the list of YouTube videos will be displayed. Not only are the genealogy sessions displayed, but there are other contributors to the local history of Canyon City, and as well as volunteers from the museum who have chosen various topics or buildings or people in the local area and have uploaded videos to the museum's YouTube site as well. So there's a complete listing there.
Yeah, thank you. And the only other thing I wanted to touch on quick, you had mentioned just kind of telling the stories, and you mentioned something about, just telling the games that you used to play. And those are things that we can easily overlook, but that those differences can really be fascinating. My mother grew up on a dairy farm, and so, her upbringing was so different, and those stories are so precious to me. One thing it made me think of, I had a friend's kid in my car one day, and I had crank windows, and he was just so thrilled. Cool, roll up windows. And, it's just something you don't think of, but something like that can make an impression on people. So
yeah, some of us grew up before seat belts, or you were loaded into the back of the pickup truck. Many things have changed in the last 20 years or more.
Well, thank you all for tuning in today. We hope to see you next month for our adoption genealogy program, and we hope to see you at the museum. Thank you.